The big news of the weekend is this horrific incident in Waukesha, Wisconsin. According to the UK Daily Mail, at least 5 people have been killed and 40 injured, including at least 12 children, after a speeding SUV plowed into a Christmas parade taking place in a suburban town near Milwaukee on Sunday. A red Ford Escape broke through barriers in Waukesha, Wisconsin around 4:40 p.m. as the parade was taking place, drove at speed through crowds, sending bodies flying as horrified families watched on helplessly. We're not going to show you the video because it really is pretty horrific, and it doesn't add anything here. You can just see kids marching down the street, and then this Ford SUV, which you can't really, you have no idea why it's there, just plowing through people. Apparently some gunshots were fired as well. Police originally said a person of interest was in custody. No arrests had been made. Chief Daniel Thompson said no motive had been established, but the officers are not discounting terrorism. Officers are also looking into the possibility the suspect was fleeing an earlier incident involving a knife when he reached the parade, which would be unbelievable. If this guy was involved in a knife crime and then was running from the cops and decided, hey, while I'm at it, I may as well run over a few school children. Truly an act of evil. Thompson said one officer fired at the vehicle in an unsuccessful bid to stop it, with witnesses saying it sped along the parade route and did not slow down even as it hit a schoolgirls' dance troupe and elderly members of the Milwaukee Dancing Grannies, along with families sitting by the side of the road. Dozens of pieces of footage ended up capturing the carnage, revealing the car traveled at least 3 blocks down the parade route before breaking through barriers and speeding away. A picture captured later at an unknown location showed what appeared to be the vehicle involved, backed onto a driveway with the hood badly dented and bent up. It's unclear how the vehicle came to be there. Police have not revealed exactly how the suspect was arrested. Just horrific all the way through. And there's lots of speculation at this point about the motive of this person, about whether this person was, in fact, involved in an earlier crime that day. I don't, on this show, talk about the identities of mass shooters or mass killers or terrorists. I do talk about who they are and what they did, but I don't reveal names on this show because we don't wish to inspire copycats or give attention to some of the worst people on earth. What we do know at this point is that this person does have a criminal record. He's a 39-year-old black male from Milwaukee County, a felon. And apparently, according to Wisconsin right now, Milwaukee, their court system suspended his speedy trial rights due to court congestion. They released him on $500 bail, even though he was facing a serious weapons and other felony charge. Then, even though he was stocked with a string of new felony charges, he was released again on $1,000 bail 3 days before the parade massacre. This guy has a rap sheet as long as your arm. Milwaukee County has a really long backlog of criminal cases. And because of bail reform, this notion that if you are poor, you should not be held in jail because you can't pay the bail, so instead we'll release you onto the streets for a minimal amount of money, like $1,000. Now you have criminals who are back walking the streets, and this is a perfect case in point of that. According to Judge Mary Trigiano, we've taken this pandemic very seriously, as well we should, including the variants. We're being very careful. This is with regard to the backlogs and the unwillingness to keep people in jail. So a lot of people who have been committing crimes, again, are back out on the streets. On social media, the suspect apparently showed animus toward police, posted unhappiness about the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict, as well as George Floyd's death, quoted Malcolm X. We don't have a full motive at this point. What we do know is that this person should not have been on the street. Apparently, the Department of Justice criminal record history includes many of these arrests. Arrested in 1999 for a carry concealed weapon charge. In 1999, he was also arrested for aggravated battery, felony. That was dismissed. Carrying a concealed weapon, non-criminal, disposition not reported. In 2000, more arrests for aggravated battery, felony, convicted. Probation. Resisting, misdemeanor, dismissed. Cocaine possession, misdemeanor. 2002, resisting, non-criminal. Take and drive vehicle without consent. Habitual criminal, felony, dismissed, no prosecution. 2003, resisting, misdemeanor, convicted. 2005, resisting, misdemeanor. Receiving stolen property, misdemeanor, dismissed. Possess controlled substance, dismissed. 2009, paternity warrant, non-criminal. Resisting officer, non-criminal. Resisting, misdemeanor, convicted. 2010, felony strangulation and suffocation, domestic abuse. Amended complaint filed, convicted. Misdemeanor battery, dismissed. Criminal damage to property, dismissed. 2011, probation violation, felony. Hold for probation authorities. Extradition request, disposition not reported. Resisting, convicted. THC possession, paternity warrant, possessed with intent to deliver THC, convicted. Bail jumping, convicted. There's only up to 2011, by the way. You still have another 10 years on this guy's record to go. 2012, probation violation, turned over to probation authorities, bail jumping felony, no prosecution, failure to appear, multiple, bail jumping misdemeanor, 2 counts, no prosecution, resisting, no prosecution, extradition, possess THC felony, case dismissed. 2020, firearm convicted, of out-of-state felony, charge issued. Possession of meth, dismissed. Endangering safety, domestic abuse, reckless use of firearm, charge issued. 2021, paternity warrant, non-criminal. Okay, again, this is according to Wisconsin right now. So this guy has a rap sheet that just goes on forever. And he was out on bail, on $1,000 bail, after having been arrested like 3 days beforehand for bail jumping. So the strategy apparently in Milwaukee County is somebody jumps bail. If you capture them, you should have them post bail, which they will then jump. Makes perfect sense. But this is part of a broader prosecutorial strategy that the left has imposed on major cities across the United States. You want to know one of the reasons why we've seen a major uptick in crime in major cities across the United States over the past few years? It's because prosecutorial strategy has changed dramatically. It's because people like George Soros have poured millions of dollars over the past 7-8 years into electing left-wing prosecutors across the country. So remember, this sort of activity has been championed by the left. Prosecutors letting criminals out of jail. Jeffrey Toobin, who used to be more famous as a legal commentator, now he's more famous for not being able to keep his junk in his pants. He wrote a piece in 2015 for New Yorker magazine called The Milwaukee Experiment. What can one prosecutor do about the mass incarceration of African Americans? Quote, like many people in the criminal justice system, John Chisholm, the district attorney in Milwaukee County, has been concerned for a long time about the racial imbalance in American prisons. The issue is especially salient in Wisconsin, where African Americans constitute only 6% of the population, but 37% of those in state prison. According to a study from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, as of 2010, 13% of the state's African American men of working age were behind bars, nearly double the national average of 6.7%. The figures were especially stark for Milwaukee County, where more than half of African American men in their 30s had served time in state prison. How, Chisholm wondered, did the work of his own office contribute to these numbers? Could a DA do anything to change them? Now, this is the part that's amazing, right? Because this is the animating philosophy behind so much of the Democratic Party these days. Is if a disproportionate number of people from a particular group are in jail, it must be because the system is evil and corrupt. Now, here's the problem. The result of that sort of thinking means letting criminals out of jail based on race and class. That's what it means. It means that if you wish to have fewer black people in jail, you're going to have to either identify people who are innocent and shouldn't be in jail, or you're going to have to let criminals out of jail. And people who supposedly need to be let out on bail after having jumped bail multiple times, which is apparently what happened in this particular case in Waukesha. Chisholm decided to let independent researchers examine how he used his prosecutorial discretion. Over several years, Chisholm allowed the researchers to question his staff members and look at their files. The conclusions were disturbing. According to the Vera study, prosecutors in Milwaukee declined to prosecute 41% of whites arrested for possession of drug paraphernalia, compared with 27% of blacks, etc., etc., etc. So Chisholm decided his office would undertake initiatives to try to send fewer people to prison while maintaining public safety. How's that going for you over there, John? Going great for you, is it? By the way, if the case is that he's letting too many white people off, then arrest more white people who are criminals and put them in prison. Do not let criminals out of jail. Nobody has an interest in letting criminals out of jail in order to, quote unquote, even out the numbers. Chisholm said that prosecutors should be judged by their success in reducing mass incarceration and achieving racial equality. Excuse me? Prosecutors should be judged on how the crime rates go down. That is the only thing prosecutors should be judged on. We have an adversarial system to protect defendants. It is not the job of prosecutors to determine whether mass incarceration is a thing or achieving, quote unquote, racial equality in outcomes is a thing. That's not the prosecutor's job. The prosecutor should not be looking to, wait, we have too many black people in prison. I guess this criminal who is black should not be in prison because he's black. That's insane. That's insane. And there's a reason why I've seen a spiking murder rate in Milwaukee over the last couple of years. Chisholm's efforts have drawn attention across the country. Cyrus Vance, Manhattan District Attorney, said, quote, John is a national leader in law enforcement because he is genuinely interested in trying to achieve the right results, not only in individual cases, but in larger policy issues as well. Chisholm reflects a growing national sentiment that the criminal justice system has failed African Americans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this has been the shtick. Right? The shtick for a very long time is that prosecutors of the left are doing a great job by evening out the numbers. That is the thing that means the most. He said the racial disparity spoke for itself, starting with the disparities in the state prison system. But there were very significant disparities in specific categories. The one that stood out the most was low-level drug offenders, possession of marijuana, drug paraphernalia. There were clearly a disparate number of African Americans being charged and processed for these offenses. He says, when I first saw the data, I thought, here is some good news. Because apparently it said that we charge white offenders for property crimes at a higher rate than we do black offenders for those kinds of cases. I thought, good, here's a disparity the other way around. But a deputy of mine pointed out what the data really meant was we devalue property crimes in the center city. We don't charge a car theft. Okay, well, that's right. So then the question is, why are you not charging the drug distribution cases? Why are you not charging the felony bail jumping cases? It's just incredible. So the entire basis for criminal justice in Wisconsin has been rooted, apparently, in this Michelle Alexander, new Jim Crow, if too many black people are in prison, it's because America is racist philosophy, as opposed to you're a prosecutor, lower the crime rate by arresting criminals who committed crimes. Again, if you want to make the case, these people are innocent. If you want to make this case, these people shouldn't be in jail, make the case they shouldn't be in jail. But you can't make the case they shouldn't be in jail when they are criminals. And you shouldn't be allowing them to roam the streets, ramming cars into children because you want to establish racial equity. Are you insane? Again, the murder rate in Wisconsin is out of control. By the way, Milwaukee police have only solved like 58% of homicides last year in 2020, compared to 68% in 2019. The rate thus far this year in Milwaukee is 34%. Their murder rate is out of control. There were 190 homicides in Milwaukee last year. 190. Okay, but this is supposed to be a big win for this prosecutor? Insane. According to the Medical College of Wisconsin, there have been 941 victims in homicides by firearm, homicides by non-firearm, or non-fatal shootings in Wisconsin in 2020. Okay, that is a jump from 542 in 2019. So, really well done. And here's the problem. This is a national strategy, okay? This is not just in Milwaukee. It's not just in Waukesha. Okay, this is a national strategy by the left. You can see it happening. Okay, so as I say, this is a broad strategy by the left, okay? And it's financed by people like George Soros. I know that the media want you never to say George Soros' name because it's supposedly anti-Semitic to point out that George Soros funds wild left-wing causes. He does. Okay, I'm an Orthodox Jew. I can say whatever the hell I want about George Soros. George Soros is a left-wing fanatic, and he has spent billions of dollars on various left-wing causes around the globe. He is a very bad man. He does very bad things. And the left celebrates him for it. Politico reported back in 2016, quote, George Soros's quiet overhaul of the U.S. justice system. Quote, while America's political kingmakers inject their millions into high-profile presidential and congressional contests, Democratic megadonor George Soros has directed his wealth into an under-the-radar 2016 campaign to advance one of the progressive movement's core goals, reshaping the American justice system. The billionaire financier has channeled more than $3 million into 7 local district attorney campaigns in 6 states over the past year, a sum that exceeds the total spent on the 2016 presidential campaign by all but a handful of rival super donors. His money has supported African American and Hispanic candidates for these local, powerful roles, all of whom ran on platforms sharing major goals of Soros, like reducing racial disparities in sentencing, directing some drug offenders to diversion programs instead of to trial. It is by far the most tangible action in a progressive push to find, prepare, and finance criminal justice reform-oriented candidates for jobs that have been held by longtime incumbents and serve as pipelines to the federal courts. Andrea Dusteel, president of Emerge America, a candidate training organization for Democratic women, says the prosecutor exercises the greatest discretion and power in the system. It is so important. There's been a confluence of events in the past couple of years. All of a sudden, the progressive community is waking up to this. Soros has spent on DA campaigns in Florida, Illinois, Louisiana, Mississippi, New Mexico, and Texas. This is as of 2017. Through a network of state-level super PACs and a national 527 unlimited money group, each named a variation of safety and justice. Each organization received most of its money directly from Soros. And again, this is not just in blue states. This is in red states as well. This is how you see left-wing prosecutors in places like Florida, left-wing prosecutors in places like Louisiana. And this stuff has some pretty predictable effects. You know why it's happening. Okay, you know why the crime rates are going up in a wide variety of areas. Again, fast forward 2021. This is an article from July of this year. Quote, Politico, 4 wealthy donors fuel overhaul of California's criminal justice system. The social justice movement has never lacked for energy. Last year's police killing of George Floyd sparked waves of support for BLM. Progressive donors in recent years have strategically targeted prosecutor races in major cities because district attorneys wield power over sentencing and investigations. In California, social justice advocates are preparing to defend the state's top prosecutor, Attorney General Rob Bonta, who is closely aligned with the reform movement and was one of the nation's most liberal AGs. The last 10 years has been the biggest shift I've seen in terms of philanthropic interest in this issue, says Lenore Anderson, who heads Californians for Safety and Justice. When you have that shift, the door is open because you're with the winds of change. In California, few causes get far without a pile of money. 4 donors, Patty Quillen, Quinn Delaney, Elizabeth Simons, and Caitlin Krieger, channeled $22 million toward criminal justice ballot measures and allied candidates the previous 2 years. Their campaign contributions have steadily increased each election cycle. They spent $3.7 million alone to elect George Gascon, who rode the social justice wave that swept over America last summer to unseat incumbent LADA Jackie Lacey in November. Gascon, by the way, has then proceeded to completely wreck the city of Los Angeles even worse than it was by failing to prosecute criminals. Quillen is a philanthropist and the wife of Netflix CEO Reed Hastings. Simons is a former teacher and daughter of hedge fund billionaire and philanthropist James Simons. Krieger and her husband, Instagram co-founder Mike Krieger, run a criminal justice nonprofit. And of course, George Soros has given some money here as well. In 2018, an organization funded by Soros supplied the most money for the California DA races. And by the way, this is exactly how San Francisco ended up with Chesa Bowden in San Francisco. Right? Bowden is a wild left prosecutor in San Francisco. And because Bowden is wild left, you end up with scenes like this. So over the weekend, 80 looters simultaneously broke into a Nordstrom near San Francisco. Here's a little bit of the video.
Take a look behind me. You can see some of the doors and windows of that Louis Vuitton store smashed, glass littering the sidewalk. Several streets surrounding Union Square had to be blocked off and still are. According to a police source, this began as a smash and grab, then turned into a robbery a little after 8 p.m. Spoke to one witness who says that more than a dozen people could be seen running out of the store, clinging to merchandise and hauling as much as they could. At one point, SFPD officers could be seen surrounding a gray convertible Mustang with one patrol car blocking it, several officers taking their batons to smash out the windows. Source telling us that at least one person inside that car had to be taken to the hospital.
Okay, so people just showing up at Louis Vuitton, just robbing the place, just like taking the entire place down. According to the Washington Post, drivers blared their horns Saturday evening as dozens of thieves carrying luggage and bags darted from a Nordstrom department store near San Francisco and hopped into cars waiting for them outside. All but 3 of the 80 or so looters escaped, police said. 2 store employees were assaulted. One was pepper sprayed by the intruders, according to officers in Walnut Creek. That's a city about 25 miles east of San Francisco. The spectacle Saturday night was one of several incidents of looting and shoplifting reported at high-end retail stores around the Bay Area over the weekend. So the Friday night Louis Vuitton hit, that was in Union Square. On Sunday night, officers in Hayward, about a 30-minute drive from San Francisco, were investigating after a group of smash-and-grab burglars destroyed glass cabinets and stole merchandise from a mall jewelry store. San Francisco DA Chesa Bowden, right, one of these lefties elected by George Soros' money, said, "These crimes are happening around the Bay and across the country. I stand in partnership with our local, regional, state, and federal partners as we work together to do whatever it takes to keep you safe, except for arresting criminals and keeping them in jail, because we obviously wouldn't want an unequal number of black and white people in jail. Forget about who's committing the crimes. The only thing that matters is that we have an equitable distribution of convictions. That's the only thing that matters. And by equitable, they mean equitable to the racial population, not equitable to the amount of crime that's being committed." So here's the question. How many people have to die for the equity vision? Really, how many criminals have to be put out on the streets because of the vision of equity? Because of the lie that if too many people of one particular race end up in prison because too many people of one particular race are committing crimes, this is because the system itself is racist. You can make the argument there's too much crime in particular demographics because of history and the racism of history, but making the argument the system itself is responsible right now for too many black people looting Louis Vuitton is ridiculous. It's ridiculous on its face, and it ends with more crime and more people being harmed, particularly, by the way, more people in the black community as a generality. Now, there are consequences to the narrative the left puts out, and those consequences are incredibly dire. I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date with all our future content.